Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Yelders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Buenas, this is Cisco Gallardo with the Healing Generations podcast, Yelders edition. I want to say what's up to our relatives out there, listeners. I want to remind you again, if you can, please, if you want to support the channel and support our platform here, the Healing Generations podcast, please share, review, follow, however you're listening to this on Spotify, on Apple Music. If you put a rating or put some kind of review, that really does help us out in a lot of different ways. But before we get going today, as you know, I like to do the four directions again to acknowledge our ancestors, acknowledge the future generations, and just kind of bring it full circle, As we talk about healing, the healing journey in people's lives, it's important that we acknowledge our ancestors. Where I'm at right now, I'm on Gabrielino land. I want to acknowledge them in that way. So in your space there, I want you to close your eyes if you can. I want you to think about the direction of the east where all the men are. I want you to think about your grandfather, your fathers, your sons, your nephews, your friends, your homeboys, your camaradas, your compadres. I want you to think about all of them, all the beauty that they bring, all the pain, all the blessings, them. We want to collectively bring them into the room. And then as we're turning to the left, as we face the west, we're thinking about all our relatives in the LGBTQ space, all the things that they go through, all the various communities they represent, the various struggles that they have. We want to think about them, how they change our perspectives on life sometimes. And then as we face the west, we think about all our grandmothers, our mothers. We want to think about them. We want to think about all our daughters, our sisters, our tias, our hood tias. We want to think about all of them in their lives, all the beauty that they've been through, all the struggles they've been through. We want to bring that spirit here with us, that we remember them. We think about them. And then I want you to move to your left. Even if it's in your mind, I want you to face the north. And in the north, we think about all our ancestors. We think about all our elders in that area, all the people who lived before us, who struggled for us, who did all the work for us, made sure that we could go to college, made sure that we can have jobs, that people are not discriminating against us in certain ways. We have a lot of ancestors, our spiritual ancestors that helped us along the way when we didn't even believe, but they believed. In fact, they prayed for us a long time ago. We want to think about them. We want to think about our elderly people this time of the year, too. It's getting cold, and some of our elders, they don't have, sometimes they have to make tough choices. I want them to always be warm. We want to think about them. And they're lonely, too. We want to make sure we talk to them. We say hi to them, smile at them, give them a chance to tell their stories, Even if you heard the story a bunch of times, just listen. There's a lesson there. And then as we turn again to the south, there's that spectrum between our ages, all the way down. And we want to remember all the children in our lives, even the babies that are not here yet. We want to remember them, how we're going to shape our future for our children. We want to think about all those newborn babies, all the toddlers, all the little preschoolers, and then elementary school, and then in middle school and high school and college. We want to think about all of the youth, the things that they go through. We want to think about all those sacred ages, as they develop, learn about love. They learn about peace, what peace is. We want that for all our children in a good way. We want them to feel blessed, to feel loved, to feel that they're sacred. And then I want you to turn around and put your hands up in the air, think about that sun, what it represents, the hope, that light every day, that dawn that comes, reminds us that there's a new day every day. We could start over. We just have to walk towards that. We just have to want that, a new day, a new life, a new decisions. You could change your life at any moment. Even though your circumstances will take longer to change, that first change is within you. And then I want you to touch that ground. I want you to think about Mother Earth, thrown unseen. Just all that we take from her, all that she gives us. We want to do our best to take care of her, make decisions that help her out, not be so wasteful and appreciative of all the blessings that we have, the food that we eat from Mother Earth, all the things that it gives us is just too much. Sometimes you just have to be in awe of it to really appreciate it. And then in the center, I want you to think about creation, just how beautiful the creation of life is. All the animals, all the different things in our world, there was a time where those things evolved. We want to honor them. We want to honor the creator in that way. Whatever you believe, I'm not telling you how to believe. Just in something, there's something good out there. And we want to acknowledge that in a good way. Take a deep breath. All right. Well, thank you for you're taking a little time out of your day, to acknowledge those four directions and what they represent and how important it is for us to remember those and be in gratitude and take that time out from time to time to make sure that we're acknowledging our life wherever it is, good or bad. We want it to be better. We have to acknowledge where we're at. So today's episode, we have a guest that I met at a training a couple weeks ago. I've heard of him before, and it was a pleasure being in the training. It was a Hova Novla training. We were in Fresno, and we have somebody who's been a facilitator of Hova Novla for a while. And, I could tell his genuine concern for the community and appreciation. So I'm happy to bring in Javier. I'll let him introduce the organization that he's working for now and a little bit about what they do. But Javier, can you tell us a little bit about your life up to this point, about your family, your background, your journey?
Absolutely. Buenos dias, familia. My name is Javier Guerrero, pronouns he, him, his, and I'm from Fresno, California, born and raised. So, I mean, that question, that's a deep question within itself. But a little bit about myself, as mentioned, born and raised in Fresno, California, son to Alejandro Guerrero and Maria Guerrero, brother to Paula, Maritza, Hilario, Joel, Alejandro, and I'm pretty sure I have some other siblings out there on my dad's side, more keep popping up throughout the years. And proud graduate of Pacific Union Elementary, go Skunkers, Washington Union High School, go Panthers, Fresno City Community College, go Rams, and Fresno State University, go Bulldogs. But a little bit about myself. I grew up, actually, man, I'm not going to lie, I had a really good childhood. I grew up on a 25-acre ranch. We grew grapes. We were farmers. And I have no complaints about that, man. It was kind of just joy out there, man. I had a lot of space to run around, getting into adventures, misadventures. At the time, you're kind of like, oh, man, I have to go out there and help out with, the different seasons of the agriculture. But I look back now and it's like, man, I can't wait till one day I could go back and maybe retire back into that country life. And, again, it was just all joy for me at that time. Moving forward, though, something that really brought me into this work is around my teenage years. I was 14 at the time. That all kind of came to I look back now, it was almost like a fantasy world, that I was living. It all came to a screeching halt. My father was actually incarcerated. Our house got raided by the DEA. And my father, got incarcerated. They gave him 17 years. He did 14. And then he was deported after that. But when I do share this story, I tell people, I was like, man, I remember it like it was yesterday. It was I was talking to like my high school sweetheart the night before, and then just gonna wake up and go to school the next day, and all of a sudden we wake up at like 5 a.m. to like agents like raiding our house, and I was like, what the heck is going on? Again, that fantasy world came crashing down. And then from there, I'll probably share later in the podcast just some of the things I went through, my family went through, but that is definitely a time where I had a lot of anger in my life. I was lashing out a lot, and I didn't know what. I was just angry at the world. And around the age of 19, I went through a situation where actually I was shot in a drive-by shooting, and I survived, obviously. But that's something that really changed my life also, where I kind of started redirecting my anger towards maybe a positive sense. One of my mentors at the time told me, hey, you're alive, but you need to start living. And that's something that stuck with me to this day. I share it with a lot of the youth that have gone through similar situations as well. And around that time, I became introduced to the National Compadres Network through one of my mentors named Socorro Santillan. So shout out to Socorro. She introduced me to National Compadres Network by she actually purchased, I don't know if it's like tickets or whatever, but to the yearly retiro that the National Compadres Network puts on. It was me and four other colleagues that went. And we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. I was like, what? Like a men's retreat? What does this mean? We're going to the middle of nowhere. Like, we're going to be talking about, like, I had no idea. I went into it completely blind. And again, I didn't really have the most positive mindset at that time. I was still kind of like, yo, this is completely out of my comfort zone. And yeah, man, after that weekend of being introduced to Circolo, some of the elders, the teachings, after that, I became trained in Joven Noble. I mean, that completely just introduced me to, healing. And before that, I mean, I went through like counseling, things like that, but this was a whole lot different, as I'm sure most of you have heard. And yeah, from then on out, I just been really involved in, healing work, community work, advocacy, and just really trying to work with the community, whether it's with elders or with Jovenes. And it's really brought me a lot of joy. And it's helped me kind of look in the mirror and realize some of the healing I need to focus on for myself as well. And then currently I'm working with Reading and Beyond here in Fresno, California, continuing this work.
Well, that's a lot. You went from just being you had such a good childhood to you got into some trouble in a lot of different ways. But before we get through different points of your life and
Right.
kind of flush that out a little bit, I just want to ask you the question point blank. So, what does healing mean to you?
Oh man, you come at me with some deep questions, man. I heard your other podcast too, man. I was like, oh man, he goes in deep. um, Y'all, I think healing means different things for different people, and it could even be at different aspects of their life. Healing could mean just finding inner peace with yourself. It could be forgiving. It could be acknowledging. It could mean letting go. It could mean working through some of the hate you might be feeling, trying to kind of work that out.
Mhm.
Um, it could also mean kind of like embracing the hurt. You know what I mean? Sometimes we don't fully heal because we're afraid of like acknowledging that hurt that we went through, the trauma we went through. And so we kind of, don't fully ever come out of it. But yeah, I mean, I think it just depends. It just, sometimes healing could also mean passing on teachings to future generations. It could mean researching, sometimes not being at one with your culture or your family history, like feeling that disconnect and then now growing into that connection. That could definitely be healing. So it's just, man, it's different for everyone. And, it just takes a lot of work also.
Definitely takes a lot of work. So as you were going through your healing journey, when did you realize kind of like that you're working on yourself a little bit and that you were healing? Because a lot of times people that get that healing, they don't know what's happening until it's already there. And it goes with the other side too. If you're doing bad things, sometimes you're like, well, I'm just doing it once, or I'm just acting up a little bit. Before you know, it's more bad than good. But when you're doing good and you're getting blessings, it kind of works the same way. Things are coming at you. So that first retreat was kind of a crazy way to be introduced to kind of the teachings. So where in that journey did you start to realize that you were dealing with some of your struggles that you had internally?
Honestly, I think it's when I started waking up and just not being as angry. I never acknowledged why I was just angry. I was just always kind of like in a bad mood. And going back to like, as a kid, I was a happy kid. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I mean, you throw temper tantrums as a kid and stuff like that, but I was always a joker, man. I was an inner nerd, man. That part too, man. Now it's like cool to be a nerd. Back then it wasn't cool to be a nerd. But yeah, I mean, I was always a joker, like the, free spirit. I had a wild imagination. Like I said, I would just roam all over the ranch. And like I said, sometimes I didn't need toys. It's just, I would just walk around and like create my own little fantasy world sometimes. But then, yeah, I think, once my father became incarcerated, I think, again, it was during my teenage years. They kind of relate to that video you showed us during the training about the elephants, how they had their elders taken away or their positive male role models taken away, and they kind of started acting out a little bit in their adolescent teenage years. So that's what it was. I mean, I grouped up with a lot of guys, and a lot of them are still friends with till this day. But when we look back and we talk about it now, one of the commonalities we had is a lot of us, our fathers were either incarcerated or absent in our lives. So we were kind of all like backing each other up. And, we just grew into that family aspect. But I think all of us just kind of shared that anger too. And as mentioned, I think it was at the time I wasn't the closest with my mother. And it was when, I survived that drive-by shooting. I remember seeing her walk into the hospital room, and I thought she was going to be angry, man. I remember even when I was waiting for the ambulance to show up, I had two friends with me that were there, and someone, was like, "Hey, man, you should call your mom." And I was like, "No, I don't want to tell her this, man. She's going to be so mad at me." Like,
Isn't
that was
that
my
crazy? We'll
thought.
be acting up and still be worried about her mom. We'll be like, oh
Yeah.
no, my mom. I'm more worried about. I know exactly how you feel. I'll be acting up, but if my mom knew, for some reason, it freaked me out more than the police. I'd be like, oh no, my mom.
Exactly. So when she walked into that hospital room and I saw just tears pouring down her face, I think that right there was like an instant just change in me. I knew I
Mm.
never wanted to be the reason to bring this hurt to my mom and just my family in general ever again. And I think at that point, that's when, I mean, again, I wasn't, introduced to Sirkula yet, but I knew at that point that, hey, I need to start working on myself, and I start seeking out like some counseling services, offered by the university I was at the time. And, that was cool too, man. But, again, everyone kind of needs their own form of healing. And, again, it's when I got introduced to Circulo, I started kind of like, just acknowledging a lot of it within myself. And, like I said, some of it I needed to feel the hurt. Some of it I kind of needed to let go of some hate. So it was just kind of all over the place. Like at that time, I wasn't speaking to my father either. I kind of was going up and down with him. When he got locked up, I was really close to him, but then I started kind of having hate towards him because I was like, "Yo, man, you're the reason that we're all struggling right now." So there was a lot of that I started need to acknowledge, let go of, and just also embrace the healing. And I kind of started getting back to that, jokester side of myself and that nerdy side of myself, and that just going back to that happy dude.
So, what lessons have you learned from your culture, your family, life experience along the way that helped you really, with that healing journey and development? And I know you talked about you getting voluntold to go to the men's retreat. You After you were shot, you had this aha moment. They referred to it as this moment like, wait, maybe I don't want this for my life. Maybe I don't want to do that. I want to think about and acknowledge there's a lot of young people right now that are in that stage, right, where they're not happy with their life for whatever reason. It's not, they find themselves in and out of trouble. Maybe it's not even criminal trouble, it's just trouble in general. Maybe they're just having a hard time, and they themselves need to kind of have an aha moment. So, in that light, where you were at that stage, what were some of those things that you recognized about your family? Like what resonated with you in the retiro, in the men's retreat, or in circles you were going to? What resonated and kind of that spoke to you about your life experience and the real need to kind of view yourself differently, that you're sacred, that you're a blessing.
That's one of the main reasons actually when you invited me to do this podcast. I'm not very comfortable like just kind of speaking about myself, especially to like maybe potential audience or something. I'm okay with public speaking, but just not about myself. But that's why, I was actually excited to do it, because one of the big things at the Circle was just hearing the stories of other people that were my age, elders, younger than me also. I mean, there was kids there too, but just from adolescent all the way to, elders, kind of share their stories and what they were going through, and getting out of their comfort zones also, and acknowledging that they need to work on themselves. And that I think helped me out a lot. Again, because like with counseling, it was like one on one, right? You don't really kind of hear other people. It's just, all the focus is kind of on you. And there's different forms of counseling. So I mean, there could be group counseling also, but that wasn't what I did. But Anyway, this one with the Circolo again, I think that helped me out a lot and made me realize again, like you just mentioned, I wasn't the only one that went through some of these traumatic events, and there was other people that went through it too. And how did they come out of it? So again, I think it was Ozzy that said it at the training. He was just like, and I'm saying it incorrectly, but the quickest connection between two people is a story. And so again, just sharing each other's stories was just very powerful to me. And again, this isn't something I open up with to people right away, especially with the youth. I don't want to like, hey, first time I meet them and try to grow connection, I'm not just telling them, oh, yo, check it out. When I was 14, this happened to me. When I was 19, this happened to me. I try to grow connection, just like a genuine connection first before we kind of open up in that way. Because I would always tell people like, hey, I don't want them to like, I don't want clout or for them to respect me for like, oh my gosh, you survived a gunshot or something like that. That's not what I want them to look at me for, I want them to acknowledge more of just like the kind of like hard work I put into to kind of get where I'm at. Also, that's what I more would rather they kind of relate to me as or kind of respect more. So that's what it was.
Yeah, sometimes there's this need for people when they speak to kids or whoever, they want a trauma bond, right? Like you've
Yes,
been
yes.
through some hard stuff. I've been through some hard stuff. You kind of share the trauma. It always reminds me kind of like that movie scene in various movies, right? Where they started comparing scars. Well, I got this and I got
Jaws.
this scar here. And a lot of these scars are internal too, and
Exactly.
sometimes we compare them. And then there's the thing about doing your testimony, as my Christian brothers call it, right? They say, "Oh, I'm going to give my testimony about things that I've been through in life and how I overcame them." But quickly, a testimony could become a bragamony, and you don't want that, right? You don't
Yeah,
want
that's
kids to acknowledge that piece of it, but at the same time, there is a lesson, just like what Ozzy said about you're probably closer than you think in your stories. That's why
right.
stories are beautiful, right? You kind of talk about what happened to you and what you were feeling at the time, and even when you're going through stuff, you don't see the answers right away. They're there, they're in front of you, but a lot of times you're blinded by your feelings, you're blinded by the situation, who's involved, your anger. Like what you were talking about, you talked about your dad being incarcerated and how you had this misplaced anger. I'm not even sure you knew where it was coming from at the point, but you just were angry at
Right.
life, at everybody. So people that are going through that, in your life, a lot of people have misconceptions around healing. So I want you to think about it and answer this question. How can we reframe the understanding of the healing process to better support our overall well-being? So for you, if you had to give a person going through something right now some advice when it comes to healing, like, because a lot of people are like, where do I start? Or maybe if I do this, maybe I can start my journey. But how would you explain that to people?
I think you just said it right there, man. It's a journey. I think one of the frustrating aspects of some of this work is, we'll go to schools, whether they're elementary, high schools, obviously our community centers. And I feel like sometimes, like after going to Jove Noble or Chinachli or Cultura Cura or One Circolo, folks are expecting to see like an immediate change. Like, oh my gosh, like they're a completely different person now. And we've been told by like school administrators sometimes, like, okay, like after they go through like 3 sessions, like, hey, he's still acting up or he's still using curse words in class. And it's like, well, I mean, we're barely getting to know each other. And we try to explain to them that this is a journey. We understand that, hey, maybe for this school year, we might see a little slight change, but we're planting that seed for the year after that, 5 years later, 10 years later. I think one of the most rewarding part of this work is I've had youth that I worked with 10 years ago that, I run into sometimes just randomly out in Fresno or just, around California. And they'll just come up to me and they'll be like, hey, man, like, check it out, dude. And, they were previously, like, say, in juvenile justice campus or something, they were previously incarcerated. And now, hey, man, I'm an electrician. Hey, man, I'm actually working for a nonprofit, also doing this or that. So I think that's it. And they acknowledge that work. They're like, yo, and I still remember, like, what we talked about 10 years ago. But at the time, I'm like, yo, man, I don't even recognize you anymore. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because, it's one of those things where it's kind of difficult because it is about like setting them up for the future. It's not going to be like the immediate present that you see the the kind of change or results. And it's a journey. And I think people need to acknowledge that. People need to understand that portion of it. But to what you were saying too, is it always starts with something that you might think it's small, but it makes a huge difference. Going back to me with my mother, during Joven Noble, we talk about, the palabra circle, people that are meaningful in your life. And I remember like putting people in my circle, and afterwards we do this with the youth, like, hey, why did you include this person in your circle? And they're like, oh, I love them. My mother's always there for me. My father, my brother, my cousin, whoever, my homies, my partner. And then we always ended by saying, have you ever shared this with them, like face to face? Everything you just said right here in this circle, have you ever said those words to them? And a lot of times it's crickets. People are like, oh no, like I've actually never told them I love them, or I never said to my dad outright I love him, And that was one of the things, like I feel like that's kind of one step where I started. Like, I went to my mom, I think when I got back from the retreat, I think the first thing I did was hug her and say I love you. And she was kind of like taken aback, like, oh, what the heck is wrong with you, And the fact is, like, that's why it was awkward, because I haven't said those words or gave her a full embrace hug in so long. So, I think that alone was healing in itself. And, one small step that you could start with is just sharing how meaningful these people are in your life and what they mean to you.
So tell me, Javier, I want to ask you a question about, the kids that you work with. First, tell me, how did you get into this working with youth? I mean, you were in college, you had all this stuff happen to you, but what in college made you think, oh, I want to work with youth? And how did you get that first job?
All right. So I feel like I was always kind of a people person. And I have a lot of pride in Fresno, as a lot of people should have pride in their hometowns. But Fresno definitely gets a bad rep. And I mean, I get it. We're not known for the best things. I think I grew up hearing like, oh, we're number one in like car theft, or we're number one in like STI transmissions, or number one or top 5 in the nation in teen pregnancy. And so I don't know. I always grew up like always just like, yo, but like I know Fresno has good in it, And one of my first jobs, I was in like field work and warehouse work and things of that nature, which, hey, I learned a lot from that work as well. So not putting that down at all. But one of my first jobs kind of working with the community was working in after school programs while I was in college. And it was actually doing science projects with kids. So
I like
that kind of gave me my first taste of just working with like youth. And it was like elementary, middle school ages. And I just fell in love with them, man, to be honest, just like their energy, joking around with them. Again, I think that kind of, again, brought some healing to me, because it took me back to when I was a kid and like what a joker I was. Yeah. So again, it just brought some fun into my life. And that's where it started. I started doing after school programs, and it was in the science division with the City of Fresno Parks and Rec. And I was doing science projects with kids and at community events. Then we also did like outings, like field trips to like lakes and stuff like that. But from there, I actually changed my major. It was originally, I was a major in English, and I changed it to psychology. I was between that or social work, because I changed it because I knew like, hey, I want something that's going to kind of prepare me a little bit better, give me some tools in working with the community. And I just fell in love with psychology. And then from there, I got hired at a nonprofit named Fresno Barrios Unidos. That's where I met one of my mentors named Socorro Santillan. And yeah, again, I got hired on actually as a health educator at first, doing workshops with teenagers on like healthy relationships, self-esteem building, family planning, STI prevention, education. But from there, another colleague of mine named David Budavong, who's like my partner in crime when it comes to this work, we kind of started a male involvement program, and through Socorro Santillan, and that's where she wanted us. She was already familiar with the National Compadres Network, but we weren't. And so she really wanted us to be trained in Joven Noble. But before, she was like, hey, y'all got to go to this retreat to kind of get introduced to it. And then that's kind of just where it jump started, man. And that's how we got involved in it.
So tell me that first night at the retreat, right? You're sitting in the circle, and you got the altar in the middle. What were you thinking?
All right. First, I was thinking like, yo, is this some type of like religious, spiritual kind of cult here? Like, what's going on here? Are we gonna, you know what I mean, be brainwashed or something, And I acknowledge that, because I bring that up when we like say build an altar with the youth. Like, I could only imagine the thoughts that are going through their heads,
Yeah.
But also it's at a I think it's Mission San Antonio, right? The
Mhm.
Padua, right? Something like
Yes.
that. That's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, or I think there's like an army base next to it, or not too far from it. We're staying in these like dorm rooms, kind of, you know. And so, yeah, the first night there's like sage burning, there's elders, singing music that in a language I'm not familiar with. The four directions are being acknowledged, and again, I'm just like, what the heck is going on? But I think what really helped me out too, especially after that first night, because the first night I was still kind of taken aback, like, what am I doing here? It's kind of the break times you have afterwards, or like the evening time when you break from Circolo, and you
Mhm.
start just kind of having that downtime, like dinner time or lunchtime, or just you're hanging out with everyone else, and you meet people from all over the U.S., from other parts of the world. I met people from Brazil, Canada. Let me see, there was someone from Puerto Rico one time, and I think that's again where you start just like again sharing those stories that maybe because again, Circle are so many people, you might not get to hear everyone's story, but you also could kind of make those connections outside of the Circle too. They would say the Circle is going on even when we're not in that room sitting down together, you know?
Yeah, it's the whole experience, right? Just being
Yeah, that
there,
helped me
kind of
out a lot.
talking to people, listening. Yeah, I've made so many connections just from the retiro, just meeting people and talking to them about whatever, and that's the good thing about it too, because there's like people that are streetwise, but there's educators, there's people that are professionals, judges, all who name. There's all kinds of different people, recovering lawyers. You never know who's going to show up to a retiro.
Exactly.
I think that's beautiful that she sent you. So when you were driving back from the retiro, what did you guys talk about?
Oh man, that was the complete. I think all of us. I went with four. It was four of us all together. And actually, we met a gentleman named Alberto there that actually was from Fresno also. And we carpooled back with him also. And he actually helped us start up a Circulo in Fresno. But anyway, the drive back, I remember, sometimes we'll have that question of like, hey, what is your spirit animal? What animal represents you? And we went into like a deep dive conversation on that one. And I remember to this day, we were kind of helping each other out. Like, hey, man, I could see you like as like an elephant, or I could see you as a butterfly or whatever, like we were all kind of just helping each other out. Like, what is the animal that represents us? And I remember at the time by some of my elders during the Circulo, and I was even gifted a little like a turtle. And so I was kind of like, what? I think that really represents me, like, and at the time I didn't even fully know exactly why. I just really resonated with it and the teachings they were telling me around the turtle.
Mm-hmm.
So that really like stuck with me on the way back. But also, I think one of the funny stories is one of my colleagues, and he tells this story too, is Lupe Ramos. He was the one that when we went, he was like ready to like he took like a 30 pack of beer with us and stuff. And I think we had to like show him like, hey, bro, it says like no beer and stuff, And he's like, what, for real? I was like, I know, man. Where are we going? They won't even let us take beer. And so we had to leave all that behind. And then on the way back, we were all just completely like, changed. And I remember with him, we said like, he's a butterfly. And at first he was insulted by that. And he was like, a butterfly? Like what? We were saying just because of the evolution, the transformation you go through, right? Because we saw
Yeah,
a huge
yeah.
change in him, especially. And what's funny is he was actually at this past training that I saw you guys at 3 weeks ago. And now it's to the point that he wants to get a butterfly tattooed on him. So that's just like a crazy little thing. I tell him, like, man, like how far we've gone. I remember you were insulted by the butterfly. Now that's like fully embraced. So, that's a little funny story on the way back of how it all kind of, impacted our lives.
Well, I'm glad that your mentor sent you there, to kind of learn and kind of absorb it, because I do believe in order to do this work, you have to kind of start doing it yourself. It's definitely something that you have to be in to really teach it in a good way.
Absolutely.
So what counsel and advice would you give to others regarding health and healing? Like if somebody right now was interested in the work, they're kind of going through it a little bit, what advice would you give them?
I want to say, I think sometimes, and even I got caught up into this, like seeing, yourself, Cisco, Ozzy, Hector, Jerry, some of the, maestros, Papa Bear, Isaac. I think sometimes we get caught up in like, yo, I can't recreate the stories, or I don't have the stories that Ozzy has or that Cisco has or that Jerry has or Hector. And I feel like sometimes when I first started facilitation in it, I kind of got a little bit nervous about that. Like, hey, how am I going to be able to provide as wise counsel to these youth that some of these elders provided to me, these maestros provided to me, And you do have your own stories, to get into the work. And sometimes it's just about building those relationships. Sometimes some of these youth just need a positive place to go to where they could kind of let their guard down. They don't have to worry about like, oh man, like I have to watch my back or anything like that. And I think that's been some of the most positive space. I mean, the teachings in the curriculum and all that is amazing. But I want to say, I think the youth, a lot of times they just come back because they love the vibes, they love the energy that they get. It's so different than what a lot of them have felt in the past. And that takes work on the facilitator also, or the organizations, making them feel welcome, accepting them for who they are when they walk through those doors, from day one, acknowledging that they're a blessing. Nobody's perfect. I think too, like, we all have to work on ourselves, like you said. That's part of it, and fully embracing that as well, that we all need healing and, we're all dealing with traumas in our lives as well. So I don't want anyone to think like, oh, you have to be a perfect individual if you're going to be a facilitator. No, we're all working on ourselves. It's okay. And it's just about building those relationships, I think. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say don't worry about emulating the maestros, kind of like build up your own kind of identity as a maestro also, is some advice I would try to maybe pass on. And yeah, I think that helped me out a lot. And I think also just being on the same page with your organization or whoever's funding the work or whatever's going on, just acknowledging that this is a journey for them.
Yeah, and organizations that do this work struggle too. As an organization, people don't ever realize really the work behind the scenes is just to create a circle or a whole and it takes work, right? Getting the kids
Absolutely.
together, being there for them. Yeah, it's more than just the teachings. The teaching is the framework, but the real healing happens in between, during.
Absolutely.
It happens with the acknowledgement of them, shaking their hand, acknowledge them. All those things just kind of bring about the sense of connection. And we know that's one of the biggest things, right? That's why the circle is so powerful, because it is about a connection. Each one of us really matter in that way. And I'm really happy that you found that and you realize, you don't always have to be the maestro, just listening and being to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower too.
Absolutely.
You have to be able to go along with whoever's running it, whoever's maintaining the circle, whoever's facilitating, they need support too. And so when you're the one doing it, they feel that same love and support at the same time.
And sometimes the youth themselves, they see that they'll kind of like feel your vibes. Be like, hey, they'll ask you like, hey, are you doing okay?
Yeah.
And I think that means a lot to me too, when they kind of are looking out for you also. So yeah, I mean, there's been so many powerful just moments in being involved with this work and just working with the youth throughout the years. And, I could go on forever about it, but just have a lot of love for all of them, whether they came to one meeting or one session, or if they, stuck around for years. They're all in my heart and my mind right now.
So for you, can you talk about some practical tips or techniques that you incorporated in self-care or healing circles for yourself? Like, what do you do to, keep yourself feeling good and making sure you're not getting too heavy with emotions and feelings? Like, what are some of the things that you do?
I think first and foremost, I start getting connected with my family again. And everyone's different. Some people might already be really close to their family. But yeah, I think getting connected a bit with my family, and I'm not saying we like, meet up every weekend or anything, but, I would go periods without, really visiting or speaking with them for months at a time. It would happen. So I think that was something I needed in my life, just that connection of family. But I think another thing was, again, acknowledging how much I actually kind of just like, I don't know, just appreciate Mother Earth also. And, I start going on walks now. I mean, I know it sounds something simple, but I like going on walks, but I don't like walks just like through a neighborhood. I like to like go like find like an area where I'm going to see stuff like whether it's like, yo, I'm going to run into like, a snake today or like a hawk or something, or like, I like to just see like random stuff like that going on. And, I'll send pictures to my partner sometimes. I'm like, look, I found this snake. Yo, it looks pretty cool. She'd be like, stay away from that. Like respect nature. Okay. And I was like, oh, I respect it. Also reading. Again, I did say my first major was English. And so big into reading, and I got away from that. I actually wanted to be a writer when I first got into college. And so I started kind of just writing. So again, just kind of like acknowledging what your passions are and making some time for them, even if it's a little bit of time. That's helped me out a lot. And then again, not getting away from Círculo, also, having a monthly Círculo. I mean, even if it's you and 3 other people, I mean, that's a Círculo, or you and 2 other people is a Círculo. Because I've been part of Círculos that have had over 50 people and some that have been me and 1 other person. But I think that's a constant one also is the cargas, always making sure that you're not carrying those cargas with you for too long, that baggage. And then again, going on that is acknowledging the regalos. That simple teaching has done so much for me. And then even like, I don't know, like in my room, I have my own private altar that I have, and it changes throughout the years. I'll kind of change it up here and there, but all those teachings have really helped me out. And on top of that, just acknowledging what are some things that really bring you joy in your life.
I like that. I appreciate that. Building a small altar, doing those things for yourself to keep yourself grounded is always important. So tell me a little bit where you're at right now, like the organizations you're with, what kind of work are you doing, and what do you want to do in the future?
Absolutely. So actually, double dipping a bit. I am currently also employed with Parks and Rec again. So I went back to like my humble beginnings kind of. And so that on that side of it, though, I'm doing a little bit more like admin work. Like I'm not as involved in the community in that type of sense. And so that's why I'm very grateful that another one of my mentors, Sandra Flores, she's executive director with Reading and Beyond. She reached out to me. And also David Budavong, the one I mentioned is my partner in crime with this type of work.
Mm-hmm.
And she received a grant to be able to have some facilitators in Jovenoble again. And, it's a part of a greater program that also involves like case management for young men, job readiness, all those kinds of aspects are going to help them out tremendously. But she reached out to us and she was like, hey, I would love to bring Jovenoble to the organization. And, she said that she has some staff that are some great young men. They haven't been trained in Jovenoble yet. So she would like us to kind of help mentor them. So, it's a different kind of role for me a bit, but I jumped right over. I just tried to make it work with all my other things going on in life. And I love it. Just getting back into the facilitation work. Kind of got away from it for maybe like 2 years or so. And so it just kind of like, again, brought some happiness back into my life, making those connections again, and hope it continues for the long run. And, right now I'm very content in life. I'm happy where I'm at in life, being able to do this work still while also kind of being employed full-time somewhere else that helps me kind of pay the bills and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm content where I'm at. If anything, I would love to do a little bit more work, maybe incorporating some work with some kind of more rural areas of Fresno County. I know a lot of them don't get the resources that they need. And it's difficult for them, because for them, it's like, I have to do like a 2-hour drive in order to go to this organization or that organization. But I would love to incorporate more work out in the rural areas also.
Yeah, that's a unique thing about the Central Valley is there's just so many communities along the valley, just all the way up. And some are very small, some are, mid-sized cities, some are very, small cities. And just even after I left Fresno, I came back the weekend to Porterville, which is, maybe an hour or so, hour and a half or so from Fresno. And I really liked it over there too. I went over there for the powwow, but at the same time, I cruised around the city, kind of just, I like to observe a city, what's going on, what works there, who's there, what makes up the fabric. So I'm happy that you're thinking about that too, thinking about how do we get to these smaller communities. And we even seen within the training, the diverse members of the community there. There were people that were in long-term doing work in the city, maybe moved there, or there were people who grew up on the ranch like you, or grew up in, doing farm work, their family or whatever. It's a unique place. And there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good work.
And if I could shout out just all the farm workers across the nation, but Central Valley in general, again, I grew up on a ranch, and that's something I didn't really get to mention earlier is one of the things I like to relate to with the youth about too is a lot of them grew up working in the fields. You mean in agriculture? And I mean, again, I was more on the privileged side. I mean, I grew up working in the fields, but my family was actually the owner of the ranch. You know what I mean? So it was more like they were trying to teach me lessons rather than like, oh, I need to get out there and work the field in order to survive, So I do acknowledge that, but I remember that I went through a phase also where I was a little bit kind of I guess ashamed to say like, oh, my family were field workers and stuff, Um, looking back, I have no idea why I felt that shame. I think it was just maybe the crowd I was around or something. But I know that they're the bloodline of this state, the bloodline of this nation, really, are the field workers. So really want to shout them out. My parents were field workers, and they saved up to get us the lives we live now, and so just very proud of them for that. And just again, just want to give them the respect.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think people realize how important the Central Valley is to the for food safety, food security, all those different things. Like we need to be able to grow food, and that area of California and many areas of California feed the nation, if not other parts of the world as well. So it's definitely unique, and there's a lot of hardship there too. There's a lot of blessings, but a lot of hardship, and of course we want to lift them up. And those that do that work, it's tough work. So
Absolutely.
as we wrap this up, what do you want people to walk away with when it comes to, healing, it comes to doing this work?
I know it sounds cheesy, but I would just say, you gotta love yourself. I think again, going back to my healing journey is I didn't love myself. And I still go through some of those days. Don't get me wrong, like I'm still like, oh man, dude, you messed up on this or whatever. You need to work on this. But I think that's where it just starts is you gotta be able to look in the mirror and, be happy with the person you're looking at. And if you can't do that, it's gonna be hard to kind of help out or work with the other youth, right? Because I think that's something I struggled with in the beginning. Like I'm not saying you have to be a perfect person, but I wasn't able to look at myself in the mirror and I just kind of felt like, fake. You know what I mean? Like, how am I going to work with youth if like I can't even look myself in the mirror and be happy with who I see? So I think it just starts there is you got to love yourself. Just realize we all make mistakes, learn from them. I share this at the training. We all go through struggles and we all learn different ways. My way of learning and maturing and growing is I made a lot of mistakes. Okay. But I learned from them, don't keep repeating them. And so my mom actually told me that one day, again, shout out to my mom, Maria. My father was locked up. My older immediate siblings were out of high school already. One was, working, trying to make ends meet. The other one was off in college outside of Fresno. And I had a younger sister, Marita, that was 7. And so, she was just trying to keep it all together at the same time. I didn't get to get all into it, but, the government was trying to take our ranch away because, again, my father was locked up. They're like, hey, you guys bought this with drug money. So I could only imagine. My mom is like the strongest person I've known my whole life. So I could only imagine everything she was going through. And then me, a knucklehead, getting into trouble all the time. So one day she kind of pulled me to the side. It was actually in a car ride. I think she picked me up from school because I got suspended for the day or something. And then she just told me one day, like, hey, like, mijo, like, you're the one that's going to have to learn everything the hard way. And at the time, I just was like, yeah, whatever. But like, I didn't know, I didn't get the meaning at the time, but I fully acknowledge it now that, definitely I had to kind of stumble and fall, hit a lot of roadblocks and walls and make a lot of mistakes in order to learn. But that really stuck with me. So whether you learn the hard way or you're just someone that really gets it from the get-go, as long as you grow and learn from it is what really matters.
All right. Thank you so much for your interview, for taking a little time out today. We recorded this kind of early, normally when I record later in the day, but this is a good one. I appreciate you, making time out of your day to have a little conversation with us about your journey and about healing. So I want to remind all listeners one more time, please subscribe, follow, share, however you're listening to this, write a review. Send us an email. Maybe there's a guest that you think we should interview. Let us know. You can send it to me. You could go to our website and you can find my email there and reach out to me. Let me know what's going on. I would love to hear from you. And I appreciate each and every one of you, on this healing journey. And, there's always that chance today. You can start. You know, all you got to do is say, you know what, I'm just going to work on one thing at a time. And you just start doing that. That's the best way. There's times even today where I'm like, I'm not happy with the way things are going. I just say, all right, what do I need to do to kind of change things? And I just want to remind you of that, and that you are sacred and you are a blessing. No matter what anybody tells you, you know, you just got to remember that for yourself or for your family too. So Javier, I want to thank you again. You know, thank your family, your mom, everyone that contributes to your life, you know, takes care of you and you know, looks out for you and what you do for them as well. You know, it's important. I appreciate you and all the work that you're doing and continue work. You know, like I already said, I know you've done facilitation, circle keeping for a while, but if you ever need any help around anything, you know, just hit me up. I'm always ready to help and do work, especially in that area. You know, that's one of the areas that we want to build on. You know, we want to build something good in all areas of California, but the Central Valley seems very important in a lot of ways. You know, I hear a lot of help that needs to be done there. You know, there's not enough services. There's a lot of different things, but there's a lot of beautiful things too. That's kind of the beauty of this work. You know, you kind of just got to work on what's doing good right now. So again, I want to remind all our listeners, please check out our website, check out all our social media channels. You know, we're on all the main ones, you know, and if you even, you know, follow us on various platforms, that also helps spread the message of healing and learning. And also, even if your organization is doing something good, let us know. You know, reach out to our media people. His name is Miguel. Reach out to him. Let him know what the work you're doing in your community, so maybe we can highlight you in that way. So with that, I want to say beautiful blessings to each and every one of you again. Hope, palabra.
All my relations.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.